Do you know that he suggested to colleagues that they might want to slit their throat or jump out of a window? I had reservations yesterday about sharing some of that with you because I didn't want you to be in the position of having to explain it to any small persons in the back of the car. But, of course, you can tell by my tone and by my delivery that I am utterly disgusted by this, as indeed anybody listening should be. So there's no room for any confusion here. The man is monstrous, utterly despicable, truly disgusting. The fact that his own former colleagues have been queuing up to condemn him, some publicly, like Anne Milton, his former deputy chief whip, and some still privately. It was, of course, the former chief whip who broke cover first by publicly complaining about the despicable text messages that he had sent her. They now they pale somewhat in comparison to other allegations and other statements that have emerged. And like all bullies, he's clearly a coward as well, because this attempt to defend himself here, he doesn't deny that he did it. So what he says is that he rejects the characterization of what happened. I refute the characterization of these claims. Let's just pause for a moment. Larry David. Sorry, curb your enthusiasm. Nobody's perfect. Let's just pause for a moment to work out why he would refute the characterization while not denying the accusation. That is an attempt to pretend that he didn't really mean it, or that he was just bantering, or, and this is where I do think it's important for me to put my own cards on the table sometimes, or he's doing what I would have done 10 years ago, or possibly 15, maybe I'm doing myself a disservice, and suggesting that this is acceptable, that this goes on in other contexts, most obviously newsrooms. And here's what I learned, partly through therapy and partly through not being an idiot anymore, that it may not have done me any harm. And for the record, I don't think this actual episode did. I don't think being brutalised on newspapers did me any harm. Being brutalised as a little boy at school, being regularly beaten at school, did me enormous amounts of harm. Why is he mentioning that, you wonder? Well, guess what? I used to say about that, it never did me any harm. I used to appear on television, on those dreadful debate shows, to argue that corporal punishment, if it was reasonably and responsibly administered by an adult teacher, was a good thing, that it was the only language some children would understand, and I should know because I used to be one of those children. So we have the very simple delusion, and it can be quite a self-protecting delusion sometimes, that the harm you suffered or the bad things you witnessed are absolutely fine because, quotes, they didn't do you any harm. But here's the thing, right? I know people from that era of my career who've had nervous breakdowns. So even if it didn't do me any harm, the idea that I then moved to defend that sort of behaviour because, well, it didn't do me any harm, and in fact, I worked even harder after I got a public attack, after I was told to jump out of a window if I didn't have any. Do you see what I mean? It may have had an effect upon me that was not undilutedly negative, but there'll be someone else in the room. There'll be someone else over there, someone perhaps who hasn't learned from a very early age to thicken their skin and shouldn't have to learn to thicken their skin. Someone who hadn't been through, in my case, the public school system, and so learnt to bury their vulnerability and bury their frailty very, very deeply. There'll be someone on the other side of the room, a woman perhaps, who hasn't been raised in a way that prioritizes combat and pugilistic tendencies, who would be horribly damaged by this sort of behaviour. And even some people damaged simply by witnessing it. I mean, did you wince when I said those words? I winced when I read them. Absolutely inexcusable. There are no circumstances whatsoever in which that could be robust management or banter or whatever other words might be offered up by anybody. I can't imagine anybody actually would seek to defend Gavin Williamson on this occasion, thank goodness. There's no forelock long enough to be tugged in this kind of context, is there? But the idea that Rishi Sunak would bring him back into the cabinet, despite this clearly being common knowledge, is what I find astonishing. So you speculate a little on what Rishi Sunak thinks he was playing at. Was he essentially blackmailed into it by Williamson having stuff on him, which Anne Milton perhaps raises the possibility of? Is it a dirty deal like the one he did with Suella Braverman? In return for support, he gets a bauble, he gets an appointment, he gets a post in cabinet, and the tens of thousands of pounds that come with it, don't forget. Williamson, I think, sold fireplaces before he went into Parliament. He's not one of those people with a private fortune or a separate income. I imagine the difference between a backbencher's salary and a cabinet minister's salary is quite significant to little Gavin. So, this is a financial reward. He didn't even give him a proper job. He gave him a ministry without portfolio, a kind of made-up role. But it comes with, I presume, a cabinet minister's salary and a seat at the cabinet table, so he gets the status and he gets the taxpayers' money as well. 2 weeks it's taken Rishi Sunak to pretty much squander any goodwill or hope that he arrived in Downing Street with from people who might have been very critical of Boris Johnson or Liz Truss, but felt for about 10 minutes a modicum of relief that things might just be different. But here he is with a monstrous Home Secretary and a despicable appointment of a man who pretty much everybody knew was a bully. It's not, and it's a very good point, this. The comment about slitting your throat, as Fran has just tweeted me, it's not a normal thing to say. It's not the sort of thing any normal person would say. It really is beyond the realms of comprehensibility. It really is gross. And here's the point. This was clearly common knowledge. And do you know what I find particularly repellent? The idea that politics is a particularly cut and thrust profession. Politics is full of cowards and muppets, with a few glorious exceptions. But the idea, it's such a tough business, you've got to tell people to jump out of windows if you want to get things done. Just grow up, will you? It's such a tough business. Gavin Williamson, he's like a latter-day gladiator. Yeah, he's basically Russell Crowe. Yeah, so he's got to tell people to jump out of windows. Otherwise, how's he going to get these people to actually do? The man's a menace. The man's pathetic. The man is custard. And the idea that he, by dint of his position, because remember, if he was a junior member of staff, you know exactly what kind of colleague he'd be. He'd be the snivelling, sycophantic little person making cups of tea for the boss and following her around, offering to put his jacket over a puddle so that she could walk. You know exactly what he'd be like if his status was low. He'd be looking down his nose at you if you were at his level or beneath it, and treating you like the second coming if you were 1 rung or 10 rungs above. But we've all worked with people like Gavin Williamson. And then as soon as he gets a little bit of power, the true character emerges. He's a massive coward and a massive bully. He's a disgrace to public office, and he should never have been allowed near cabinet once he'd been fired from it the first time for disgraceful conduct, and then the second time for disgraceful conduct. Theresa May thought he was a national security risk. She believed, although he denied it, I can't remember whether he denied it or merely denied the characterization of it, that he had actually leaked documents referring to the Chinese technology company Huawei. The idea that Johnson would let him back into the cabinet is sadly easy to believe, because Johnson had the morals of an alley cat, which is possibly a little unfair on our feline friends. But Rishi Sunak inventing a job for him and giving him tens of thousands of pounds of our money while knowing that this is how his colleagues spoke about him? Don't get it, do you? Hit the numbers. You will get through. 0345 6060 973. Why on earth do you think that Rishi Sunak, mere hours after promising a government that would return to the days of professionalism, accountability and integrity, put the proven bully and infamous coward Gavin Williamson back in his cabinet? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Genuine question. This fella's Prime Minister. What the hell was he thinking? Hit the numbers now. You will get through.